This is a Ramana Maharshi clip, a talk by Ramana Maharshi with comments by Richard Clarke. This is a time to listen, reflect, and deeply meditate. I'm Richard. Welcome. I'm reviewing and commenting on the book Talks with Sri Ramana Maharshi. Today is from talk number 53. A young man, Mr. Knowles, came for darshan. He had read Paul Brunton's 2 books. He asked, "The Buddhists say that I is unreal, whereas Paul Brunton in The Secret Path tells us to get over the I thought and reach the state of I. Which is true?" Maharshi: there are supposed to be 2 I's. One is lower and unreal, of which all are aware, and the other, the higher and the real, which is to be realized. You're not aware of yourself while asleep. You are aware in wakefulness. Waking, you say that you were asleep. You did not know it in the deep sleep state. So then the idea of diversity has risen along with the body consciousness. This body consciousness arose at some particular moment. It has origin and end. What originates must be something. What is that something? It is the I consciousness. Who am I? Whence am I? On finding this source, you realize the state of absolute consciousness. The questioner asks, who is this I? It seems to be only a continuum of sense impression. The Buddhist idea seems to be so too. Maharshi: the world is not external. The impressions cannot have an outer origin. Because the world can only be cognized by consciousness, the world does not say that it exists. It is your impression. Even so, this impression is not consistent and not unbroken. In deep sleep, the world is not cognized, and so it exists not for a sleeping man. Therefore, the world is the sequence of the ego. Find out the ego. Finding its source is the final goal. In this dialogue, a young man named Mr. Knowles visits Ramana Maharshi seeking clarity on a philosophical question. Knowles had read Paul Brunton's writings and was puzzled by the apparent conflict between Buddhist teachings and Brunton's perspective, particularly regarding the I. Ramana responds by distinguishing between 2 aspects of the I or self. He explains that there seems to be a lower, unreal I that individuals commonly identify with in their daily lives. This lower I is associated with the ego and is tied to the body consciousness, which is limited by time and space. People experience this egoic I in their waking state and often during dreams, but it disappears entirely during deep sleep when self-awareness is temporarily lost. Then Maharshi talks about a higher and real I. This I is distinct from the ego and is associated with absolute consciousness, which is another expression for what and who you really are. It is this I that you seek to realize. It is not bound by the limitations of the lower I associated with the body. To understand this, Ramana encourages a thorough investigation of your sense of identity. He encourages self-inquiry to ask, who am I and whence am I? Where does this sense of I come from? Inquiry leads you to the source of the real I, which is absolute consciousness or the ultimate reality. Inquiry is asking a question and being open to a new answer. Mr. Knowles responds by expressing the doubt that the I is merely a continuous stream of sense impressions. This is the Buddhist perspective. In Buddhism, the self is considered an illusion. An experience rises from a sequence of sense impressions. Ramana does not deal with the Buddhist ideas and their different views of the ego. He emphasizes that the world, including the sense impressions, is not external to consciousness. The world exists within our consciousness, and our impressions are, in fact, a product of our own awareness. He explains that when we're in deep sleep, the world ceases to exist for us because there is no ego or I present to perceive it. Therefore, the world is intimately tied to the ego's existence, since it is there when the ego is there, and the world is not present when there is no ego. Ramana teaches of the nature of the world and the self. You must investigate the source of the ego, which will ultimately lead to the realization of the state of absolute consciousness, or the true I. You realize that the self and yourself are one and the same. This dialogue underscores the importance of self-inquiry and contemplation to transcend the limitations of the ego and discover the deeper, unchanging I. This is in harmony with the teaching of Advaita Vedanta, which emphasize the oneness of the individual self with the ultimate reality. So inquire, know yourself, and be always free and at peace. These videos help bring Ramana Maharshi's teachings into your direct experience. Subscribe now